A very good day and welcome. And today we're speaking whether or not issues, and today we're covering cold fronts. So what is a cold front? What can you expect with the passage of a cold front? And most importantly, how exactly are these fronts getting formed? So we're looking at a cold front and its definition. So we're speaking of a zone of transition or a barrier between two air masses. You're looking at it separating a warm air mass from the tropical regions and a cold air mass which originates from the polar regions. And as much as people usually hear of cold fronts in the winter period, they do actually occur throughout the entire year, but we see in the winter season they do move northwards and towards the South African region or the southern parts of Africa. And usually with their progression, we expect them to move from the west moving eastwards. So usually that's why we'll say it's coming in from the southwestern parts of the country, moving through Cape Town and then progressing eastwards over the Eastern Cape, the central parts of the country, and therefore exiting the southeastern parts. And with the movement of it for the southern hemisphere, we expect it to rotate cyclonically or clockwise direction. And these cold fronts are very important in atmospheric circulation. And what difference do we expect to feel with the weather or notice with the weather? So with the passage of the cold front, we expect a sudden drop in temperature. There's also a change in wind from northwesterly direction, usually a warmer wind, usually clear skies ahead of it. And with it turning southwesterly behind the cold front, that's when we'll start noticing the drop in temperature. And with it as well, with the picking up of the winds, we expect a gust front, and also atmospheric stability also becomes affected. So we expect the atmosphere to be a little bit more unstable, expecting development of clouds, and therefore showers and thunder showers can occur. But it is also very important to note that not all cold fronts are the same, and it doesn't necessarily mean that all these things will actually happen at once. That is because cold fronts may vary in intensity, the shape of the cold front, and also the speed of propagation. Now looking at this was a cold front that occurred over the southwestern parts of the country, and that is the tail that you'd usually notice with a cold front. If we say there is a cold front over the country, this is the sort of image that you expect to see. A lot of cloud development, a lot of showers, thunder showers in places as well. But ahead of this front, where we're expecting those northwesterlies, offshore flow, it is quite clear ahead of that front, and in some instances we do get a warning for high fire danger conditions as well. And looking at the cold front now, looking at it from our surface charts, how would it look? We expect that line with those barbs. That's how we usually see a cold front when it is drawn for us. Now let's say that cloud that you just saw would be us looking at it from above, looking at it at a satellite image. But if we were to consider it from a view, a cross section where we'd see it, the storm itself from the surface going up into the troposphere, this is how we would see it. So at the frontal position, we've got that warm air ahead of the cold front, that tropical nice warm air, and behind it we've got all that cold air. Now as the cold front moves through, this cold air is usually more dense than the warm air. So it forces this warm air up at the frontal position, and then the drops condense, and then we get a formation of a thunder cloud, or where we're going to get showers and thunder showers out of these clouds. So that's why we see that nice tail of where the formation of the cloud is. But how do we get this circular motion that we speak of when we draw the front? So this is a Norwegian model explaining how it actually forms. So you need to have a pre-existing transition zone, or a separation of a warm air mass from a cold air mass. And then in it we get a wave forming, or a kink, or a perturbation, a disturbance in the wind, or the energies trying to balance each other. We get further development in those energies, and also remembering that the Earth does rotate, and for us here in the southern hemisphere, we expect cyclonic rotation. So it intensifies, the cold air is denser, moves faster, catches up with the warm air, and that's when you start getting that occlusion or the catching up of those two fronts. And then you actually get that cyclonic motion around the low pressure cell, getting that clockwise or cyclonic motion. And this is the typical shape that you would see with a cold front forming over the southern parts. Now, as it moves through, we do eventually, after a few days, see it dissipating or it dying down. So that is typically how it would form, and then how it would form the curvature and get to a point where it dissipates. And this is just an example for you to see how would it look like if you actually annotate those satellite images. So this is an example of a cold front sitting just to the southwest of the country. You can see that cloud band and moving over the southwestern parts of the country, where you'd see the clear conditions ahead of it, again because of those offshore flow, northwesterly conditions, possibility of high fire danger conditions over those western and central parts of the country, and that band of isolated showers and thunder showers in places with that movement of the front, and behind it expecting those cooler conditions with those southwesterly flows. But that is all from me for this week. Please join us again next week with another edition of Whether or Not. Till then, goodbye.